Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the 6th Annual Getting Played Symposium on Equity in the Entertainment Industry and Awards, hashtag Getting Played Symposium. I am Kathleen Tarr, the founder of the Symposia and today's moderator. This is the first Getting Played Symposium exclusively hosted in virtual space, so bear with us. Still, gratitude to the Ohlone, the original inhabitants of the land I am currently occupying here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Some logistics. The recording of this symposium may or may not be made available after the event, so don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss anything. And although it likely goes without saying, all participants' opinions are their own and do not represent their employers or the symposium sponsor, Stanford University's program in writing and rhetoric. Thank you, Power, for sponsoring these annual symposia since their inception. In the interest of time, we will be limiting our introduction of panelists, so please read their full bios on the Getting Played Symposium website. You may be wondering at this time of pandemic, why is equity in the entertainment industry paramount in this moment? Well, we needn't look much further than the headlines to make that connection. Asians in the United States are being violently targeted regardless of ancestry. The assaults stoked by politicians who intentionally speak of SARS-CoV-2 as the Chinese virus. Seniors are being told it is better for them to die than for a clearly problematic economic system to falter. And when a choice that will hopefully never come demands a decision between who will be provided life-saving medical support and who will be left to die. An article in the Tampa Bay Times a few days ago reports the Florida Bioethics Network guidelines suggest using age of patients as a tiebreaker, giving younger patients priority. If that is not offensive to you, perhaps you should deliberate the ethics of prioritizing female COVID-19 patients over males who face a higher mortality rate, a suggestion that has not arisen in guidelines for the obvious reason that males, even if more susceptible to the illness, are nevertheless deemed equally, if not more worthy of life, whereas older people are not. Not so for people with disabilities either, who have already had to fight in the courts for protections against protocols that would rob them of care during this pandemic. And then, of course, there are these other horrifying disparities. Navajo Nation has a greater per capita incidence of COVID-19 than all US states but New York and New Jersey, and an infection rate 10 times higher than neighboring Arizona. In New York City, the virus is twice as deadly for Black and Latinx people than whites. African Americans are dying at much higher rates in every state, not just because of historic racism and comorbidities, but also because of what we're not supposed to say out loud. That medical workers who are, yes, to be thanked for working on the front lines of this pandemic, are study after study proven to be biased to the cost of higher mortality rates in Black and other marginalized patients. In England as well, people from minority groups appear overrepresented among novel coronavirus deaths by as much as 27%. Michael Harriot tweets, "It's irresponsible to write coronavirus is killing Black people without explaining why, and we know why." He continues, "Poverty, medical redlining, doctor bias, profiteering. It's like reporting for some reason Black people keep dying when the cops show up. You have to say why." So I'll say it. I'll add to that list employment discrimination in the entertainment industry. That discrimination shapes who we see on the big and small screens and on stages throughout this country and in many parts of the world, which in turn shapes who we deem a perpetual foreigner, a throwaway, an object, at best a supporting character in the narrative of our day-to-day lives. The statistics about disparities in entertainment hiring have been well known since the Screen Actors Guild casting data reports were made available in the last millennium, and long before that by anyone paying attention. The question is and continues to be, what do we do about it? The efforts that get the most attention request that Hollywood and the entirety of the entertainment industry regulate themselves, get their own house in order from within. Some of these efforts have shown a degree of success, such as gender parity in children's television finally being reached last fall, following gender parity for screen time and speaking time, which was achieved in children's television back in 2011. And we should celebrate. But we also should not ignore that parity achieved represents advancements for white women and girls. And in other media outside of children's television, equity for even that demographic has not been attained, as neither across races, for people with disabilities, and for all those at the intersections above and below the line. the industry's employment numbers have real impact. Gina Davis famously said, "Media can be the cure for the problem it's creating." But what is also true is that the most successful civil rights movements in the United States have required a collaboration, one that includes consumers and lawyers. In most of the talk about ushering in equity in the entertainment industry, litigation outside of sexual harassment remains taboo. That's what we're going to talk about today. The case law centering the entertainment industry is, for the most part, infuriating, with one decision acquiring most of the spotlight, Lyle v. Warner Brothers, an employment discrimination case of almost 15 years ago, which we will hear more about in a moment, filed by Amani Lyle, a writer's assistant on the extremely popular television show Friends. Of note is an amicus brief that was filed with the Supreme Court of California representing the Writers Guild of America West, the Directors Guild of America, the Screen Actors Guild, and 131 named individuals representing a who's who of television and motion picture writers and directors, including Norman Lear, whom I admire so deeply, asserting that a writer's room requires that they can share their most private and darkest thoughts without concern for ridicule or embarrassment or legal accountability. That brief and the eventual 2006 decision by the California Supreme Court felt like betrayal. It denied Amani Lyle a trial. It robbed a jury of making a finding. I'm glad we have with us today two authors of amicus briefs in the Lyle appeal that argued in favor of her claims. We are so lucky to have in conversation panelists Elizabeth Kristen, Russell Robinson, and Sarah Moshman, who I want to thank profusely for their participation under these challenged circumstances. I also want to thank award-winning magician Christian Cagigal, who will end our program, yes, you heard that right, with magic. We want to make sure that even when we are thinking of the entertainment industry, we aren't limiting ourselves to Hollywood. And I'm pretty sure we're going to need something uplifting and encouraging in 90 minutes time. I also want to thank Lisa Wentz, author of Grace Under Pressure, for her contributions to prepping for this event, Chris Roseville for providing tech and other support every year of the Getting Played Symposium, What the Productions, Novel Approach, and formal panelist Adrienne Anderson of both Black Laurel Films and American Royalty, because frankly, I do not know how I would have gotten through these days without her African chai. And no, the product placement is not paid advertising, I just love it. We will unfortunately not be joined today by special guest Amani Lyle, but we do nevertheless get to hear from her in this clip from Sarah Moshman's 2020 documentary called Nevertheless. There's some strong language, so viewer discretion is advised. We thank Amani for her service.